You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello and good evening and happy International Women's Day. And I am so excited tonight because I have a very special guest who is actually someone I look up to so much. So I will tell you about them in a moment. I just wanted to say some points on International Women's Day first. So first of all, as you may already know, International Women's Day takes place every year, the 8th of March, and it's to celebrate women's contributions to society, to raise and inspire people, so raise awareness of issues that might be happening that affect women in the workplace, in our communities, and to just get some dialogue going about things that we might want to change. So I would like to say that this year's theme is Choose to Challenge. It's a great theme because I believe the person that I'll be talking to tonight actually challenges the status quo all the time. So if you haven't met me before, I'm Ash King. I'm the host of the Nurture Your Zest podcast and live stream. And so I'd like to thank you so much for joining me. And my guest tonight is Dr. Karen Elliott. So Karen is a senior lecturer and associate professor at Newcastle University Business School, and she has so many different accolades, one of which is to be named in the FinTech Top 35 list. So one of the things I wanted to say is that when I first met Karen, I was studying my MBA, so Masters in Business Administration at Newcastle University Business School, and she was one of the academics I was so excited about when signing up for the course. But unfortunately, she hurt her leg and wasn't around, but we still had a great module, and I learned so much in that module around finance and fintech and banking and some of the trends going on. So I'm really delighted to share her with you tonight because I was thinking really hard about who I could interview or who I could talk to for International Women's Day. And for me, this is someone that I really look up to because of the work she's doing in financial inclusion, in talking about mental health, in breaking down stigma, but also the way she shows up in her research, the way that she connects people and collaborates in her community. And I just see her as a maverick and I just love her. So I'm really excited to share her with you. And without further ado, I will bring Karen onto the stream now. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Ash. What do I say after that introduction? I mean, I just leave now.
I know I have a bit of a tendency to get a bit gushy about things, but that is how I feel. And I'm really, really happy to have this chat with you. It's funny because for those people who don't know, COVID happened, as we all know, in 2020, but I had a very special podcast episode planned with Grant Murray and Karen Elliott. We were going to be talking about finance, fintech, the economy, and actually it was a perfect timing because it was around the time COVID was all breaking out. And we weren't fully on a lockdown then, but it was at this stage where the toilet paper was a huge concern.
Yeah.
And yeah, my co-host Tim very kindly, I said co-host, actually my producer, he's not a co-host, but he kindly stepped in on that occasion. And I remember listening back to that episode being totally gutted that I didn't get that opportunity, but also laughing at the conversation about toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet roll featured heavily. As well, I found out that Karen is a meme. I didn't know I was a meme. And then I made a boob in that because I said, oh, I saw on the radio. So Tim picked up that, and hashtag Karen, ooh, meme. So I was like, okay, great. So now I've actually conformed to the meme of Karen. So there you go.
That's a great anecdote to know. So can you tell us a bit about yourself? What is it that you'd like us to know?
Well, I think that Choose to Challenge has been, like you say, it's kind of a signature in my life because part of the reason I didn't know, I haven't been in academia all my life, so that's a caveat. When I worked in industry, I used to think in systems. So I always used to challenge systems because I was involved in designing pension systems, which was my first job, and maintaining systems. So I've kind of done full circle around from computer systems and maintaining them there to now examining them and looking at AI and what that means for society. But when I was in industry, I always used to think, right, we seem to demand a lot of systems and they tend to fail us. Why is that? So let's just prod the system and find out. And I do the same in the academic system. I'm not a traditional academic. I didn't come in that route. I haven't been in academia all my life. So I tend to call myself a pracademic. And the reason for that is I've had practical experience since I was 16, left school with nine O-levels. So I'm showing my age there, 9 O-levels. Didn't want to go to college at that time, went straight into industry, landed in project management. Worked in project management, then left it for a bit, ran my own business, went back into it, studied while I worked. So I did 2 degrees while I was working, worked my way up to program manager level, which was unusual at the time. And then left to have my son. And then decided I wanted to do something different. And I saw an advert at Durham University for a research assistant part-time. And I thought, that's great, while my son's young. And then the rest is kind of history. I got into Durham University and opportunities just opened because of the different skills that I had, that I could do statistics, that I understood people. I'd studied psychology and sociology and taken it through the 2 degrees that I'd already done. So I got the opportunity to do another degree at Durham University whilst being a new mum and working part-time. So I used to go on a night time. And that's where I met a great guy called Professor Dave Byrne. So people who know Durham Uni will probably know of him. But again, it was a bit of a challenging system because, as many of you probably know, that Durham University it can be termed posh. And a lot of people who go to Durham University are not like me. They're not from a working class background. They have been privately educated. I am stereotyping here, but a lot of them have. And I was an outlier. So for those who do statistics, I was the outlier. I was a mature student. I say I came from a working class background, had the qualifications to get in and just worked my way. And then as I was studying for the masters, I got the opportunity through Dave Byrne, who said, you should be doing a PhD. The rest is history. And I just emerged working at the business school, teaching project management and change. And then I was working as an RA on different projects, did a presentation at Newcastle, and then 5 years ago applied to get a job there. And then when I was there, I was interested in the emergent technologies that were coming up around blockchain and Bitcoin and what does cryptocurrencies mean for us. And that led to me applying for the current funding that I'm doing. So I co-lead a big 1.2 million project with computer science, looking at what does it mean to build trustworthy technology? So that's moving from like humans, what do we trust? And then how do I work with technologists to understand how we make that transparent and build trustworthy technologies? And that's in conjunction with Atom Bank, who are based in Durham, where I live. So it's kind of a full circle.
It's really funny, Karen, because I think anyone listening, either watching now or watching later on replay or listening to the audio of this podcast, I think what I'm loving is just the breadth of experience and knowledge that you bring that is just so different and unusual. And like you've said, the real opportunities in technology like blockchain and data and mixing different, I guess, mediums, more disciplines around, the computing and big data conversations, but also financial inclusion, and also how can we solve big problems in the developing world with blockchain technology, with this data,
But it always starts with people. I always say that, people focus on data and data. And I'm going, but it starts with people. There's a great book called The Technological Myth. And that's saying digital transformation starts with people. Because if you think about it, the technologists, the engineers who create machine learning, deep learning, and then eventually AI, sorry, the way around, deep learning, machine learning, then AI, they are humans. So when they're creating the code and programming, they're just as fallible as you or I. They can get up and have a bad day, which leads to a backdoor where you can get hacked, etc. And these are the things I've learned over the years, just taking in bits of information. So I can code and program now at a basic level, but looking to improve that. And it's just for me, every day is a school day. Every day I learn something from different people. I learn from my students. I learn from people around me. I ask questions. So again, it's a challenge. It's a learning challenge for me every day. Learn what I don't know, pick up, move that forward, think about what it means to be ethical with data. How are we using and reusing people's data? Is that okay? I mean, GDPR is one step. But we all know if we go on a website and they say, oh, you know, tick here to give you consent. If you really want to read it, you just give your privacy away anyway. It's like, ding, gone. So there's so many facets and things to think about, and they come together. And I've been doing some great work with people on a movement called corporate digital responsibility. So we've all heard of corporate social responsibility, and this is like a subset of that, to move to how can we be digitally responsible? It's like a new responsibility for organizations. Not only do you have to be aware of us as your consumers and customers and society to treat us in a socially responsible manner, what are you doing with our data? We need to have you responsible for that as well. If you're going to use it and make money off the back of it, we need to know what you're doing with it and you're using it in a responsible manner. And at the moment, we don't quite know what the full structure of that looks like. But I'm working with some people from MIT and various people who have signed up to the project who are interested in pushing this agenda forward. But it's exciting because it's right at the emergent stage. So as like someone interested in complexity, and when you're looking at complex adaptive systems, there's this element of emergence. Something emerges in the system, and then things have to adapt around it. So if you think like flicking a domino, you know, you see these great dominoes and they swirl around and they link and one falls on another. That's the thing with emergence and adaptation. Once you make a change in one part of the system, it sets off all these changes in the system, and then we have to adapt. And this is where sometimes wicked problems emerge out of it. So wicked problems as in they're not straightforward to resolve, and you've got to continually manage them because they're probably not resolvable, like ISIS cells springing up somewhere, or trying to make sure that everybody's happy all of the time is a wicked problem. You can't do it, but you've got to manage it iteratively.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm really liking about what you're saying there is just the idea of the message you're sharing. It starts with people, because there is sometimes we get labels, or we put ourselves in these boxes. So I'm very creative. I put myself with the creatives and the artists and the poets. And then you get the technology people, and you get the logicians. And, you know, actually what you're doing is you're actually interacting with all of those different communities and bringing them together in different ways. And actually that's a really good point to say about Newcastle University Business School. As a whole, the academics that are there with the Creative Fuse project or other things, what I'm really happy to say that as an alumna of that business school, and why I went to study that program and why I was so excited to work with you, for example, is just the networks and the ecosystem that you have access to in this way. But one of the things I wanted to point out that I've noticed through working with you or watching you, because I have been watching, and, you know, and the, you know, we're talking about International Women's Day today, and we're talking about choosing to challenge. We're talking about gender norms and stereotypes and things like this. But one of the things that really inspires me is the fact that you had a young child, but you also then went and did 2 degrees, and you did a PhD, and you worked. And I kind of think to myself, how did you do all of that? But at the same time, I'm also thinking, every International Women's Day that I've been to, I hear that same question asked to every female leader at the top. And I kind of wonder, how come we still have that question every year? And at the same time, I just kind of think, wow, I'm so inspired by you, because I am insatiably curious. So to have someone else that I can look up to who has that attribute kind of makes me feel like I'm not so weird. You know, it makes me feel
it's not weird. We're all different. We all, I think, you know, having studied psychology and sociology, we all have our little nuanced differences and oddities, or whatever you want to label them. I don't like labeling theory, because I just don't like it. But I think it's more a mindset. And I've talked about like an agile or a growth mindset. So Carol Dweck, who's a professor at Stanford, she kind of coined this term, saying, you know, we move from a fixed to a growth or agile mindset, some people call it. And that really gels with me, not just agility in terms of like project management, but just seeing things as a challenge, seeing them as a learning challenge. If we back away from them, then we go to the fixed pot where it's like, I can't do this. I don't understand it, so I'm not going to ask. So you just stay there. And we're all on a continuum. So you can't say, I've got a growth mindset, I've got a fixed mindset. It's sort of on a continuum. We fluctuate each day, depending on our moods, depending on what's going on in our background, etc., etc. And I think I've had people say to me, how did you do all that? And I was a single parent for a lot of it. So they were saying, how did you do that? And I said, I did have a good support system from my mother. So another woman who supported me, because unfortunately my father died when I was 22, and I've supported her because she's had some mental health problems. But it was one of those things where I just thought in my head, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it for me. So it's hard. It was hard at times, juggling everything, picking him up from school, taking him to swimming, sitting there with a laptop, feeling guilty while I'm watching him swim, sitting and working, doing things. But you adapt and you work around it. And this is what I liked at Durham, because when I was speaking to professors there and saying, what's this about complexity and adaptation? And I was interested in it. So what's your mindset? Your mindset's adaptive. So something will come up. You might not know what it is, but you'll find out what it is, or find someone who knows what it's about, and you'll ask questions, and then you can build it up. So for instance, when I used to have supervisory sessions with my supervisor, it used to last about 3 hours, because I was just, where's he taking? Where can I read about this? Where's that? And I read a lot. I read constantly. So, but I balanced that with exercise as well, because I've always avidly exercised throughout my life. It's kind of like Stephen Covey's about the leadership. What makes the 7 healthy habits of leaders, and one of them is like sharpening the saw, so you keep physically fit as well to keep the mind sharp. So I like that as well. So Stephen Covey's work around the 7 habits of really effective people. But I think a key thing as well is I don't focus on what I can't control. So I focus on what I can control, and I don't worry about the stuff. I just sweat the big stuff, things I can control and I can do. That's what I worry about. The small things that I can't control, like whether people like me or not, or they judge me, or they want to work with me, or they don't want to work with me. I'm like, that I can't control that. So why worry about it? And I said to you before, I've got a great picture that I usually put up when I'm teaching, which is big happy smiley face of Nelson Mandela. So most people listening will know who he is. And on there it just said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I say that to people. I've had many students who've failed an exam or failed an assignment, and they come in and they're upset and they're worried. And I'm saying, look, it's not a failure. It's just a learning opportunity. You just got to learn what's required of you, how you need to improve and take it forward. And I do that with my PhD students as well, saying it's just a learning opportunity. I had to learn. I've been there. I've failed things, exams and stuff, and retaken them, but it's taught me something that I've had to read a bit more or apply myself or ask more questions if I really didn't understand. And that's one of my reputations, for asking the awkward question. So
well, I'm so glad that you're that person in the room who does ask the awkward question, because I think that's the opportunity to challenge, and to actually make changes. And I think that is certainly how I see you, as that person who asks the question and makes things happen. And I'd like to think that that's what I do as well. Sometimes I get a bit scared to do it, but I'm getting there. I mean, what you've said there, you've mentioned a lot of resources that I'm going to be definitely sharing in the show notes, because they're going to help people. But one of the ones I wanted to comment on there, or one of the things that I remember really strongly from one of our first classes, was this idea of the amygdala hijack. And
oh yeah,
I had heard of it before, but that is exactly what I needed to hear and what I was feeling in that time. So, like taking on this amazing opportunity to do an MBA, and I was so passionate about it. But when, say, you do fail an assignment, and people do, and I certainly failed, a couple, and I had to resit and this kind of thing, actually, if your whole identity is invested in this idea of this thing, this really important goal that you want to tick off, and you just can't get it right, and it feels hard, and you don't know why, and you feel stupid, it's there's so much energy that you put into being in that space. And actually what you said before was you don't spend the time on the things you can't control, but that frees up so much time and energy and resource for us if we actually move past that. Yeah. So I think that's something that really stayed with me through one of your classes, was just, it's okay to be freaking out a little bit right now.
Yeah, we all do.
It's just your body.
So for those who don't know what the amygdala hijack is, it's basically, it's our hot wired from hunter-gatherer days. So when we were facing a woolly mammoth, okay? So your woolly mammoth is running towards you, you have a spear and you're standing there, and you have a split-second decision. It literally is split second, 0.02 the second it kicks in. Fight, flight, or freeze. Now, we've all felt it. I mean, if for those who are watching, remember the first time you sat in a car learning to drive and it was like light signal maneuver and you're going, what? And your body, and cortisol just rushes through your body and you're shaking, the adrenaline kicks in and you're like, I don't know which one to do first. I don't know which one to do. And it's the body's protection. It's like, are we under threat here? We are. We're under threat. So let's just, cortisol rushes in, stress hormone, and you have those choices, fight, flight, or freeze. You can't do anything about it, but you can recognize it. And when you recognize it, it kicks in. I get it. I still get it now. You know, sometimes if I'm standing up, I say I've not been an academic all my life, so I'm presenting in front of a room of academics who are held in high esteem, you know, top of their game. You get that amygdala hijack. Can I do this? Or people talk about imposter syndrome. You know, should I be here? Should it be me doing this? I think everybody, if they're honest, feels like that at some point. You know, I've been to events where top Olympians, etc., have imposter syndrome. You're thinking, what? Why would you have imposter syndrome? You've been doing all the training, you're brilliant, you've got gold medals, etc. No, still got imposter syndrome. And I like the work of Professor Steve Peters. So he's a sports psychologist who worked with the top Olympian teams like Sir Chris Hoy and Victoria Pendleton, who was renowned for suffering from this freeze. She just froze before a competition and thought she couldn't be the best cyclist, which she was. She was amazing. And he talks about, he unpacks to recognize when, he calls it the Chimp Paradox. So you have a little chimp in your head that's literally running around going, I'm freaking out. And then the logical, more computer side, AI part of your brain is going, it's okay. We don't need to freak out. We just need to focus on the things we can control. And once you recognize that, you can actually do it. But we all still get caught out. There's still times I get caught out and completely freak and think, oh my God. And it can be the simplest things that set you off. But once you know that happens, and you go, oh, okay, cortisol's got me. You know, I just need to recognize that and then chill out. But it happens to everybody. It's just our inbuilt mechanism. There's nothing we can do about it other than recognize it and plan for it. And if you're leading a team or running a project or things like that, or even teaching, you have to be aware that other people are experiencing, you know, you can see them sometimes. It's like rabbit in the headlights, like, what's she doing? I remember it happens sometimes when I bring in live clients and say, right, okay, what we're going to do is by the end of this module, you're going to be presenting your ideas to, you know, a top bank. And the students are, what? I can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can. We're going to work. And then we get there. And afterwards they go, I did do it. And I'm going, yeah, it's just our natural reaction. Are we under threat? So our body goes, oh, we're under threat. What do we do? All right, give you some cortisol and make you even worse. Give you a stress hormone. So if you need that extra strength, you know, you've heard about people in dangerous situations suddenly getting that surge of strength and adrenaline where they lift cars or they pull people out of dangerous situations. And that's what it is. It's our threat mechanism kicking in, known as the amygdala hijack. So
I think that's really fascinating, because actually I was one of those students who never thought I would do a financial presentation to a top bank, and how scary, but you know, we did, and it was great. We got a good mark. So happy days, you know, you learn through the challenge you go through. And I think this is really inspiring. I think as well, there's a really important point here. You mentioned you love exercise. You've always done exercise. And I've got a question for you here, more because I know you're curious and well-researched, and you might have an interesting spin on it. But for so many of us, exercise isn't a priority. It's not something we actually prioritize and do. I know I should be doing more, especially since I have ADHD. It's a great way to channel that extra energy out, especially being hyperactive. But my question is, if people aren't exercising, then there's also that idea around energy is energy in motion. So if you are not working out and you're not using up that energy, you're stuck. You're stuck in a space. Your mind's not working as well. Your body's not working as well. So I'm curious on what your perspective might be there. Would you say that that is the case in terms of energy? Have you felt like if you don't exercise, you just don't have that productivity that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I don't feel as sharp in lockdown, for instance, because the gyms are shut. Okay, so you mentioned I broke my knee playing tennis, and to rehab from that, to get the muscles stronger, I've been hitting the gym big time, lifting weights and to strengthen my knee back up and my muscles around my knee. And I can't do that. And I know that I'm going out for walks, and I've got, you can't see it here, but I've got a turbo trainer behind me with my bike attached, and I go on that. But it's not quite the same. But I still make sure that I at least try and get out and have a walk and get a change of scenery, because I just believe that we need to be in nature. So I like being outside on a bike or horse riding or playing tennis normally. And the gym's indoors, but there's lots of things you can do outdoors as well with weights, etc. But I will argue all day that you need to balance it. And like I say, Stephen Covey will back me up. It's like sharpening the saw. If you keep the mind fit and active, then the body fit and active, it transfers to the mind. I mean, you can't take the mind and body, you can't pull them away from, in my opinion. And there's lots of people who will agree with me. There's lots of research out there. I mean, they prescribe exercise for depression, and the government recently have just announced, because COVID is linked to higher death rate and obesity, they're now going to start pushing, for people to exercise more so that we reduce our obesity levels. I mean, it's scary that probably like 50% of our nation is obese or morbidly obese, which is quite scary, because when you aren't exercising, to me, I don't feel as sharp. I don't feel that I've got as much energy as I normally do when I'm doing my normal routines. And I think I've heard it time and time again that people, once they start exercising and they start to get the endorphins, which I've talked about before, you get happy endorphins released when you're training. And yes, it might be a drag, like, I don't want to go to the gym. But once you get there and you've done the exercise, you're like, oh, this is a great feeling. And that's the endorphins. Again, we're back to the psychology of endorphins running through your body and going, this is good for me, this is good for me, and that's what you feel. And that's why people do get exercise addiction as well, because they get addicted to this rush that they get from training and exercising. So it's like moderation in everything. You can overtrain. I've done that. And it's getting that balance between getting the happy medium to keep you, like, holistically, the equilibrium that you'll hear people talk about, getting that balance between what you eat, what you exercise, and how that makes you feel, and how that feeds over into mental health, which has become really important in the lockdown, because I can't think of anybody who hasn't really suffered in this lockdown and had stories. My son's been in hospital, my mum's got vascular dementia, so you're dealing with all that and trying to explain to somebody who's got vascular dementia that you can't talk to people and you can't go near them and you can't touch things and you've got to stay away. It's pretty difficult, because it's a bit like Groundhog every day. It's every day she doesn't remember, short-term memory loss. She can remember in 1950 and things like that after the war, but you can't remember not to touch people. So mental health is a huge thing, and as you know, I've just been involved with a great paper led by a woman who's doing great stuff in mental health. So a shout out to Dr. Becky Inkster, who is like an adjunct of Cambridge University, but using hip hop to look at finance and mental health. So she did an analysis of hip hop songs and saying that there's so much reference to money because, Black Lives Matter and the reference to Black people being financially excluded and difficulty to finance comes out in their music. So now she's working with hip hop artists to develop financial packages for that community so they're not deprived, which I said, oh, it's amazing. So I worked on a project with her saying there's a mental health tsunami coming that's linked to your health and your finance. Because if you think about it, I'm lucky. I've managed to work all the way through. I've got a job in education, but lots of people haven't. So the impact of that, and then when we get to the end of the furlough scheme, the predictions are that the unemployment rate's going to rise. If you can't pay your mortgage, if you can't pay the bills to put food on your table, and you're supposed to live off, what is it now, £94 a week plus the £20 incremental uplift, which is going to stop when the furlough scheme stops for universal credit, then there's a huge tsunami coming where people are just going to be in a position where they're not working, that they've never been in that position before. So they can't have an income. And this is where you get like the typical Venn diagram where, your finance, your well-being and your mental health well-being all overlap. And the fuzzy bits in between, we rarely talk about. So this is the work I'm doing with Becky Eanston and also Marwa Elnahas, who's also a senior lecturer in the business school. So we're looking at this because I'm just passionate about it. And so is Grant. You're putting on here that we're going to do this TEDx. This is what we're going to talk about resilience. And, when Grant and I have experienced points in our life where we've been challenged with mental health issues and how we've dealt with it and come back from it, and how about collaboration and networks help pull you through. So it's something I'm really passionate about. I hope that comes through anyway.
100%. I think it's super powerful. It's really nice actually to hear your passion, and it gets me really excited about the research you're doing and also the workshop you're doing for us at TEDx Newcastle University. One of the things I wanted to say there about COVID and the mental health impact and the things that have happened that maybe we don't know the effects yet, like you've said, one of the things that really shocked me during COVID that I found really difficult was, at the time I was a student, so I had my own business, but I also was a student. So I had a student loan, but I was doing a postgrad course, so it only went on my tuition fees. I had a wonderful husband who was paying all the bills, but he was also a startup, and it's like when we looked through what access you could get, I was excluded, I was one of those excluded
You
people.
would be, because you didn't start up your business in time and
exactly
these sort of things, yeah.
And I think this is the thing, just a point for anyone who might be listening who, one of the things I felt really was difficult is having those conversations with friends about money, because, you might have other friends who were still earning lots of money and could buy really fancy birthday presents for each other. But you actually, when you say you had a fiver, that was all you had, And I think one of the things about COVID that I'm really grateful for is the opportunity for people to say, you know what, I can't, and that's that's a complete sentence. That is what it is. But at the same time, I think that, I'm really intrigued about what's to come, what's to happen in the next series of months.
Yeah.
And I think although there's still big challenges, I'm excited about the opportunities and watching the fast acceleration of various companies in the fintech space, the tech sector, just the speed and pace of change with various things. It's just really exciting to me.
Yeah, it is, but it also comes with a caveat, because we don't want to run too far that the regulators can't. It's that fine equilibrium again between innovation and regulation to protect us. And when I say us, I mean like the general public citizens, for want of a better word. Because if we go through innovation with like artificial intelligence, for instance, where it becomes too advanced and starts learning in a way that we don't understand, which is potentially possible, not at the moment, then we need something to say, where were the decisions made? If we unpack the machine learning phase where you're training the data set to then become the artificial intelligence and it's semi-autonomous so it can start to learn, we need to think about the decisions, because there again, like International Women's Day, most of those decisions have been made by male programmers, and that's caused a problem. This lack of diversity in a lot of the algorithms that we use today are now being questioned, and it's people like myself that are questioning him, and ethicists as like there's Professor Luciano Floridi at Oxford, who is a leading light in this and saying, if we don't look at the ethical implications of AI now, we're going to rue it in years to come, because there's nothing compulsory about this. Companies don't have to abide by this. And I'm working with a tech lawyer, so Trish Shaw, who's just got so much knowledge about the legal side. You know, how do we look at computers being reasonable? Who is responsible if something goes wrong with the AI? Is it the programmer? Is it the owner of the data set? Is it how the person uses that AI? These are all kind of question marks that we're looking at now. And this sort of underpins looking at what is corporate digital responsibility, and how do we draw together the bits and pieces of work that are going on around the globe to structure it into a framework that companies can actually use and operationalize. So because I've been in industry and I'm also an academic, I'm thinking, great, it's nice having theories up here that are somewhat abstract from reality to a certain extent, but how do we operationalize and make that work? So that's why I collaborate a lot with people in industry to say, we've got some great ideas here going on, some great research you might not be aware of, but how do we get it implemented? How do we embed it in industry to make the digital society fairer for all? And this includes financial inclusion. You know, if we're rushing towards a cashless society, great, I'm all for that innovation. But what about people who can't use it? What about people who use cash all the time? If we're talking about women today, what about women who are in abusive relationships? How do they get access to cash or cryptocurrencies? How would they can't afford smart technology. So it becomes a privileged position of people who have the means to do this. And then if you put that in the context of COVID, post-COVID, there might be even further poverty. And then the people who are in this vulnerable category. So vulnerability was sort of defined by the FCA, you know, of like your life events, your health condition. So if you have a disability, if you have a long-term condition, and then where are you in life events? You know, have you lost your job? Are you unable to pay your mortgage? And then also what is your capability? What's your understanding of where you can, like you say, where you can get access and support? What's your awareness of that? Do you know about the financial technologies that are coming through that you could actually use to help you? Probably not. So these are things we've got to grapple with. And there's great people doing stuff out there, sort of Cam Kinsella, for instance, from the Astor Foundation, working with people who are homeless, drawing them in, giving them a lifestyle. So we're going to work with them to give them voice, because she was overjoyed. She said, not many researchers come to me and say, I want to give voice to the people that you work with, so we understand from their perspective, not my perspective, not my background, their background, how they've come up against pain points in the system where the system has said, no, we're failing you. You can't have access because, you know, you don't have capability, or we're putting you in this category and labeling you as such. So therefore you don't get access. Computer says no, in effect. And I want to challenge it and say, well, it has to work. If we've got all this innovation, we must be able to broaden it out to give access to all, and fairness. It has to have fairness in the system. Otherwise, how can we use it?
100%. It made me think of two specific examples that I was aware of. So one, as you know, I'm a big fan of TEDx and TED Talks, and I listened to a talk about algorithms and Facebook, and it wasn't just Facebook, it was all social platforms, but with spending. So if you have a vulnerability towards mood disorder, and it was about how fast the algorithms are now, how advanced they are in, you know, they automated, they can do so many different things, but it was saying, you know, the algorithm actually knows when someone's on a low or they're on a high. And so when they are very vulnerable and prone in their patterned way to a massive splurge, it actually facilitates that. And is that ethical? Because yes, it meets the advertisers, you know, it's great for Facebook because they can actually earn lots of money off the advertising. But for that person, that splurge has huge ramifications for an instant purchase. That's going to be something they deal with for years to come. The other thing it made me think of was recently I heard of a project, and you may have even been involved in this, but it was to do with Agile and the HMRC locally in the northeast of England. But it was this idea of forms that people have to fill in. So when you do your tax return, when you fill in personal tax return forms or this kind of thing, the digital literacy, it's so hard for some people just to get on the computer to understand what to click, what information to put in, what to upload, and just to have the time to complete that exercise and actually understand it. And the story I heard was about a couple who were both, they both had Down syndrome, and they were actually trying to help each other to fill in this form to access resources and access support. And they couldn't, and they were in floods of tears, and they were actually filmed. And then this piece of footage was taken to show people, the coders and the finance bosses who wanted all the disclaimers in, why it was so difficult. And those are two kind of key things that popped into my head, but there's so many opportunities to look at.
That's what we call like a use case. So we're looking at use case, different users and how they use the system. And that's why I've always been fascinated with systems. When you ask for things, does the system fail you or help you? And if it fails you, what are the pain points? How can we tackle those pain points? Because the other aspect as well is when you get in that poverty kind of sector and labeled as vulnerable, and in that, you're also paying a premium for being poor, because you have to pay more to get into insurers channels. You have to pay more to get credit. You have to pay more because you're deemed risk worthy. And who's deciding? An algorithm, perhaps? Or even somebody. I mean, we're looking at the moment at sort of credit scoring, and we're looking at how humans do credit scoring, and then whether it's semi-autonomous or fully autonomous through AI. And saying, we as humans, we judge people all the time. You make judgments. As soon as you meet someone, you make a judgment about what you think that person is like. Boom. In a few seconds, you just decide what they're probably going to be like. And then your behavior alters as you interact with them. But usually that first judgment is kind of your gut instinct, and you tend to stick with it. But back to the poverty premium, this is something we need to address. And I know Kevin Telford and people at GOFCoE, so that's the Global Open Finance Centre of Excellence at Edinburgh University, but they're doing great work around open banking. So how can we open up life so that it is fairer, and everybody's got a bespoke journey through this financial kind of maelstrom that a lot of people don't even understand, haven't got capability of accessing, they don't understand it. And then the upshot of it is that they're actually paying a premium for being a victim of it, for being poorer in effect. So it's like, not only are they down at that bottom scale of earning and having income resilience issues, they're not financially resilient because they haven't got a lot of savings to fall back on, etc. But they're also having to pay a premium for the privilege of being like that, and getting payday lenders and paying, over 1,000% interest, which is just mind-boggling. So we have to do something about that. And as you say, different users, and this is why I want to interact with people. And like Neil Harris at the Inclusion Foundation has been great in introducing me to different people who have different experiences, like responsible lenders dealing with people, maybe lending £200 so somebody can get a washer. Where the banks, they wouldn't get that sort of time. The bank's not interested in that size loan, but responsibly lending, so it doesn't send people further down into a poverty trap, and they're not paying too much of a premium for that. It's responsible lending. So this whole area is fascinating to me. And as I say, I keep learning more each day. So I'm not sitting here and you say about expert, but I say expertise. I have expertise. The experts to me are the people who comes up with the solutions, and in academia, people who write the theories. They're the experts. I just translate it and pass it on through expertise. So that's how I see it.
You absolutely do pass it on, because you always are able to put things in a way that I understand, where before I felt like I couldn't speak finance terminology. I can so much more now. I've worked really hard on my MBA, but I just think you have a real gift in being able to translate some of the technical jargon and research and things. So thank you. I'm mindful of the time, because for those who don't know, Karen is actually on her sabbatical right now. So she is writing papers. Is that right? Are you doing lots of research?
Yeah, writing papers, writing bids, doing some functions like this. I'm speaking to some students back at Durham University on Wednesday. Then I'm sitting on a Turing panel. So the Turing Institute is connected to the research we're doing on financial inclusion, to talk to them about use cases. And the offshoot of that is, obviously in a digital world, you need to verify who you are to identify. Now that's very difficult, again, for that that category of people that we talked about who are forgotten. So we're looking at ways as how we can do that, how we can use blockchain to record it and help it, so people are pushing out of that. And Bill and Melinda Gates are fascinated by this as well, so they're putting a lot of money in there. So that's what I'm doing on Thursday. I'm sitting on a panel again, talking about how we can push forward. So if anybody's interested in liaising, or they've got any ideas or knowledge that I don't have, feel free to reach out. I'm always open to learn from people, from academia, from industry, from their own personal circumstances, anything.
That's so good to know, and I'll make sure that I check with you the right links to share and put them in the show notes and on the blog and everything. We're starting to get a bit slicker with things with Nurture Your Zest, but it's taken a little while, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so there's one last thing that I would love to ask you, Karen, and you know it's coming. So every Nurture Your Zest podcast guest or live stream gets the question, what is your number one word to nurture your zest? So you have done a episode with us before, and your word was endorphins. What would your word be today?
Collaboration, because I think it's the key thing out of COVID is that we must collaborate to tackle particularly the mental health tsunami that's definitely coming.
Absolutely. And I also agree that collaboration over competition is the way forward. Being part of an ecosystem that helps each other and makes connections, and just the things that happen are just amazing. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to remove you from the stream. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Thank you. Bye.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight, and for anyone who's watching on replay or listening to this audio. I just wanted to say I feel so lit up and inspired by Karen's sharing. Actually, to be honest, I've been finding it really hard at the moment to feel positive and motivated with all the various things I'm doing. And I think I feel inspired now to just have a different approach and not sweat the small stuff. So I hope that by me sharing my inspirational Women of the Year for 2020-21 with you, hopefully that's really connected with you in your own way as well. So happy International Women's Day. I would like to dare you to choose to challenge. I'd love to hear if there's anything you'll be doing differently going forward in your life. And please like, subscribe, share, contact me. It's so nice to hear feedback, and I really have enjoyed this special episode. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.